Hello, I'm Chip Pickering. I'm the CEO of Encompass, and I want to welcome you to our first video conference for the campaign that we're calling BroadLand. Encompass is so excited to have launched this bipartisan broadband for all effort with Mignon Clyburn, former commissioner of the FCC. She is a leader, a champion for consumers, a champion for competition, and a fighter for what is wrong. Today, we're going to have our first conversation around a transformative piece of legislation, the Bridge Act, introduced by Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado, Senator Angus King of Maine, and Senator Portman of Ohio. As we speak about the Bridge Act and the next steps on broadband infrastructure legislation, we're very proud to have two of those senators join us. But first, I want to welcome Mignon Clyburn to this very critical effort and this campaign to bring broadband and internet to all.
Thank you, Chip. The BroadLand campaign is our effort to make internet for all a reality for millions of kids, families, and small businesses. We need better broadband, and we need it now. BroadLand advocates for more competition that brings faster speeds and affordable prices. Access to broadband can truly transform communities, large and small, urban and rural. Working together with mayors and local officials, we have the opportunity to build networks of the future that support jobs of the future. So I want to thank Senators Bennet and King for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Senator Michael Bennet, a second-term Democrat from Colorado, has been supporting the availability of fast broadband networks by leading the effort to have the speed definition of broadband raised and be consistent across the nation and across federal agencies. As a co-sponsor of the Bridge Act, Senator Bennet has been leading the effort to connect every child to high-speed internet across this nation. Welcome, Senator. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn.
I want to ask you a very simple but very significant question. How does the Bridge Act address unserved and underserved communities, both rural and urban?
Well, first of all, thank you, Commissioner and Congressman, for giving me the chance to talk to you guys. We've got two distinct issues. I'm going to get into that in terms of access and affordability, and our bill tries to address it in the following way. First, the Bridge Act says that a state has to spend at least 50% of its funds deploying high-speed broadband in unserved areas, or on other initiatives like supporting broadband affordability or digital literacy in high-poverty areas. We have to deal with both of these problems to bridge America's digital divide. And second, our bill prioritizes funding to unserved communities, those that don't even have the barest minimum of what the FCC considers high-speed broadband, which is 25 megabits per second and upload speeds of up to 3 megabits per second. For too long, these areas of the country, and there are a lot of places like this in Colorado, have been at the back of the line, or the government has subsidized networks in those areas that are woefully inadequate for the 21st century. Our bill puts them at the front of the line and insists that they receive the highest standards for broadband. But we also say that once a state has invested in unserved areas, it can then invest in underserved areas, which are those with access to speeds between 25 megabits and 100 megabits. And some proposals out there completely overlook this next tier of underserved areas, which is a huge mistake because they often have broadband that no expert would consider adequate for what people need in the year 2021.
Well, Senator, why now, and why do you think the priorities have shifted to this direction? Because for years we've made so many trade-offs, which, to your point, just kept so many communities behind. Why now, and why this?
Well, in the first place, I would like to stop subsidizing the big telecom companies who have basically spent $50 billion of the taxpayers' money not successfully building out broadband to the American people. I think we're much better off with an approach like this one that puts states and localities, not Washington, in the driver's seat and gives them the funding and flexibility to bridge the digital divide based on their local needs. So in some states, that could mean a greater emphasis on affordability. In other states, that could mean a greater emphasis on infrastructure. So that's a big change in approach. Second, it says that if you use funding in the bill to deploy a new network, you have to make sure it's future-proof. That's another reason for why now, so that it can meet our needs in the 21st century, so that we don't have to rebuild it 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. On that point, Washington has spent billions of dollars to subsidize networks that haven't provided the capabilities our farmers need for precision agriculture in the 21st century, or that our students and small businesses need to connect online. It's wasted a lot of money, and it's left a lot of communities behind, especially rural areas and communities of color. In my view, we should be thinking of high-speed broadband the way we thought of rural electrification in the 1930s or the interstate highway in the 1950s. I can tell you as a former school superintendent that if we accept a world where some kids have access to broadband and other kids have no access to broadband, that's tantamount to saying some kids have access to textbooks and other kids have access to no textbooks. And we have accepted an education system sometimes that does that. Those are not the most glorious parts of American history. And it's time for us to address this and get on with it.
Senator, my introduction and my familiarity with your state, I have to confess, is very narrow. I've been to Aspen more than one time. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, which I think, I don't want to start, low conflict, is the most beautiful city in the world, but we'll arm wrestle over that. But Aspen is not Colorado, and Charleston is not South Carolina. Every town, city, and state, they're different. So how does the BRIDGE Act provide, you mentioned this, but both incentives and flexibilities to localities to encourage faster deployment?
We basically give the states the resources and the flexibility to bridge the digital divide based on their particular needs on the ground, which I think is a critical distinction because, in large rural states like Montana or Alaska, you've got huge challenges with access to digital infrastructure. They clearly need investment to build their networks. And that's also true, by the way, on the western slope of Colorado and on the Eastern Plain. But in a more compact state like Connecticut or Rhode Island, and those states are smaller than some of the counties in Colorado, the networks are more built out, but a lot of people still can't afford them, which is why our bill allows states to use their funds for many different purposes, from building new networks to promoting broadband affordability and adoption to connecting schools, libraries, and public housing. We trust states to use the resources and tools in this bill to connect communities based on their needs on the ground.
I appreciate that. Senator, Chip has a couple of questions for you.
Senator, yesterday, we got to see something that the country has not seen in my memory over the last decade. And that was a president with leading members of both parties of the Senate coming out of the White House and announcing a major agreement. Your work with Senator King, an independent, and Senator Portman, a Republican, really is the epitome of the best of the political traditions of the Senate. And so I want to commend and congratulate you for leading in a bipartisan way, something that truly is transformational and will bridge the digital divide. And so, one, I want to start with thanking you for your leadership, the bipartisanship, and making the agreement yesterday at the White House really possible. And the BRIDGE Act really seems to be the framework for the broadband provision of the Infrastructure Act. So your leadership vision and approach is one we celebrate. And then two, I'd like to ask a question. One of the elements of the BRIDGE Act is your speed objective, 100 by 100, the symmetrical, and getting increasing dramatically the current definition of broadband. But our competitors, the EU, UK, and especially in the race against China to 5G, they're setting gigabit speed goals by 2025. Why is that so important for the U.S. and why is broadband and our rivalry with China being able to quickly deploy advanced broadband networks at high speeds? Why is that so important?
This is such a great question, Congressman. It is vital to America's competitiveness. It is not an accident that the UK and the EU and China have invested heavily in fiber. You know, since 2013, China's fiber infrastructure has grown 9 times faster than America's. In 2013, roughly 17% of people in both the US and China had access to a fiber connection. In 2019, listen to this, China reached 86%, while America remained at 25%. Deploying high-speed broadband across the country is going to unlock economic benefits we can only begin to imagine, but we cannot be competitive without it. So this is not optional for our country. At a minimum, just consider this. It is essential if we're going to deploy 5G and keep up with China. You can't deploy 5G without a national network of modern high-speed broadband. And by the way, just a corollary to that is we also cannot rely on China or Huawei to provide the infrastructure for our 5G network. You cannot have them exporting a surveillance state through their telecommunications infrastructure. And that's why it's vital for us to develop our own industry here at home, which is another great aspect of all of this. It's going to create really good American jobs in places that desperately need them. So I think that's why we've been able to come together in a bipartisan way.
We appreciate the leadership to give us secure, fast, future-proof networks.
Yeah.
The bipartisan leadership that you've provided. And we look forward to continuing to work together. Colorado has some great companies, member companies of Encompass, like Dish, but it's really a tech and telecom hub from way back. And so we celebrate your state, your leadership, and look forward to continuing our work with you as we go forward in the infrastructure bill.
I'm just grateful to Encompass. I mean, you mentioned Dish, a great Colorado company. They are leading the way for this country on 5G and the Internet of Things. And so, look, there's a lot to be optimistic about. We got to get this bill over the finish line as part of the infrastructure package, and anything anybody can do to help us do that, we'd be very, very grateful.
We appreciate you so much, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for your interest. Really appreciate it. Bye.